He's 75 years old. Every night, while most of the city sleeps, he stands alone under fluorescent lights, guarding a building that doesn't belong to him. Not because he wants to, because he has no retirement. This isn't a rare story. If you're over 45, there's a good chance you know someone like him. Or you could become him. At 55, he believed he was doing the responsible thing. A safe retirement plan. A trusted advisor. Guaranteed returns. It wasn't bad luck. It was sold as safe. It was anything but. The money is gone. But life isn't. And what he learned the hard way could save you thousands and protect your future. Stay until the end. Because this story isn't just about him. It's about making sure you don't become the next one.
My name is Robert Miller. I am 75 years old. And every night, while most of the city sleeps peacefully in their homes, I put on a simple uniform, hang an ID badge around my neck, and take my post as a night shift security guard. It's not a difficult job, but it is a quiet one. And silence, when you reach my age, makes too much noise. I stand for hours, walking back and forth, watching monitors, checking doors, guarding a building that isn't mine, property that isn't mine, people I don't know. Sometimes I think I've spent my entire life doing this, protecting what belonged to others, while letting my own security slip away without noticing. My shift starts at 11 p.m. and ends at 7 a.m. The lights are cold. The coffee is bad and the body keeps score. My knees hurt. My back complains. And after 3 in the morning, the clock seems to move even more slowly. Many people who see me imagine that I'm there by choice, that I want to stay active, that it's nice to see an elderly man working. The truth is simpler and harsher. I'm there because I can't retire. When my paycheck hits the account, I don't think about rest. I think about bills, rent, electricity, health insurance, medication. Social Security helps, of course, but it doesn't support a whole life. It barely covers the basics. I never imagined that at 75 I would still be counting dollars at the end of the month. I never imagined that my future would be defined by night shifts and reheated coffee. When I was younger, I believed something very common among Americans of my generation. If you work hard, everything will work out. And I worked hard. For decades, I was punctual, loyal to companies. I followed rules. I trusted the system. What I didn't do was understand money. I never learned the difference between earning well and saving well. I never learned that working hard doesn't replace planning. I never thought that decisions made at 40 and 50 would be charged with interest at 70. Now, standing in a silent hallway at 2 in the morning, I understand something no one told me when I was younger. Old age doesn't warn you when it's coming, but it always collects what you ignored. As I watch my reflection in the dark glass of the cameras, I see a man older than I ever imagined I'd be. Tired, but still standing, still working. And all of this began with a decision made at 55. The kind of mistake that seems small, until it steals the rest of your life. I was 55 years old when everything started to go off track. I didn't feel old. On the contrary, I felt experienced, reliable, the kind of man who had seen it all. I had worked for more than 20 years at the same company. I had a stable salary, health insurance, a predictable routine. I wasn't rich, but I considered myself responsible. And, like many Americans my age, I carried a dangerous certainty. There's still time. It was during that phase that I met Daniel, a financial advisor introduced by a co-worker. A polite guy, simple suit, calm smile, nothing flashy. He spoke softly, confidently, like someone who didn't need to convince anyone. He told me exactly what I wanted to hear, that I could still get things in order, that there were safe options for someone close to retirement, that I didn't need to take risks. Just be smart. He used words that sounded responsible. Capital preservation, low risk, retirement protection. Nothing seemed like a scam. Nothing seemed exaggerated. It was presented as a safe retirement plan, something designed for people like me. I remember asking more than once, "Is this safe?" And he answered, looking me in the eyes, "Robert, people your age can't afford to make mistakes. This was made exactly for you." Today, when I remember that sentence, I feel a knot in my stomach, because it wasn't greed that led me there. It was fear. Fear of growing old with nothing. Fear of depending on my children. Fear of being a burden. I transferred part of my savings, not all of it, but enough to get started. He said it was better to move slowly, to build trust gradually, and I trusted him. For a few months, everything seemed fine. Statements arrived, numbers grew. He called to give updates. I finally felt financially grown up, finally doing the right thing. The problem is that real scams don't look like scams at first. They look like organization, planning, relief, until the day an email went unanswered. Then a call went to voicemail. Then another. Nothing dramatic, just silence. I told myself, he must be traveling. This happens. But the silence lasted too long. When I finally tried to access my account on my own, the website was down. I called the company. Number non-existent. At that moment, something inside me sank. It wasn't immediate panic. It was a cold, heavy feeling, as if the ground had dropped a few inches without warning. I had spent years working nights, doing overtime, postponing rest, and I had handed part of my security to someone who simply disappeared. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't fate. It was misplaced trust. It was not understanding enough to ask the right questions. And the cruelest part? Life doesn't pause when you make a mistake. It keeps collecting. Bills, time, age. And I still hadn't understood the true size of the hole I had opened. The scam didn't leave me without money overnight. It left me without peace. In the first few days, I still tried to act normally. I went to work, completed my shifts, talked to co-workers as if nothing had changed. On the outside, I was the same Robert as always. On the inside, my mind never stopped. I replayed the numbers in my head over and over. Maybe it's not that serious. Maybe I can recover it. Maybe I'm overreacting. That word, maybe, became my crutch. I didn't tell anyone, not even my wife at the time, not my children. There's a quiet shame that comes when you realize you've been deceived after 50. The feeling that you should have known better, that making a mistake at that age is unforgivable. So I stayed silent. I kept paying the bills as if nothing had changed, using credit cards to cover the gaps. I paid the minimum, always the minimum, like many Americans do when they still believe the problem is temporary. The interest started to grow, but I didn't want to look, because looking would make it real. It was during this phase that I started working more shifts. I accepted any overtime, weekends, nights. I said it was to get ahead on a few things. In truth, it was to plug a hole that never stopped widening. The worst part wasn't losing the money. It was losing confidence in myself. Every financial decision started to feel wrong. Every choice came with fear. I stopped investing completely. I stopped contributing to any plan. The thinking was simple and destructive. Better not touch this again. And that was another mistake, because while I froze, time kept passing. And time in finance is everything. When I turned 60, I tried to reassess my situation calmly. It was the first time I truly sat down to look at the numbers. No excuses, no maybe. What I saw tightened my chest. What remained wasn't enough to sustain a dignified retirement. Social Security would help, of course. but it doesn't support a whole life. It barely covers the basics. And then came another painful realization. No one was going to save me. My children were just starting their own lives. The company had no obligation to me. The system doesn't correct individual mistakes. I began to understand something no one had taught me when I was younger. A financial mistake doesn't have to be huge to be fatal. It just has to happen at the wrong stage of life. At 55, I still thought I had time. At 60, time already had a price. At 65, it started charging interest. And I was still pretending I could fix everything later. But later arrived far too quickly, and it brought consequences I never imagined I would live through. When I turned 67, I did what every American expects to do. I filed for retirement. It wasn't a happy decision. It was an inevitable one. My body no longer responded the way it used to. Sleepless nights took their toll. The aches lasted longer than the days. When the first Social Security payment hit my account, I stared at the screen for a few minutes. Not out of emotion, out of calculation. It helps, but it doesn't sustain a whole life. It barely covers the basics. Mortgage, health insurance, electricity, food. I realized then that any unexpected expense would knock me down. A car repair, a medication not covered by insurance, inflation that doesn't ask permission. Everything felt bigger once the money got smaller. It was during this phase that I understood something cruel. Retirement doesn't arrive as rest when you didn't prepare for it. It arrives as fear. I tried to cut everything, cancelled subscriptions, switched brands at the grocery store, stopped going out. Even so, the numbers didn't add up. I spent months trying to find some kind of light work, something during the day, something that didn't require much physical effort. But at 70, you stop being invisible and start being disposable. The interviews were polite. The smiles were empty. The answers never came, until an acquaintance mentioned an opening for a night shift security guard. Commercial building, little movement, more keeping an eye on things than anything else, he said. I accepted before he even finished talking. Today, my shift begins when the city slows down. While apartment lights go out, I put on the uniform. A simple badge. A radio that almost never makes a sound. I spend hours walking through silent hallways, listening to my own footsteps echo. Sometimes I stand still, watching cameras that show doors no one opens. It's a lonely job, and maybe that's why it fits this stage of life so well. No one sees the night guard. No one asks how he ended up there. And I stand there, protecting property that isn't mine, because I failed to protect my own. The hardest part isn't the work, it's the thinking. Each long night gives me too much time to remember. The money I trusted, the time I lost, the questions I didn't ask. I don't feel like a complete failure, but I don't feel secure either. There's a huge difference between being alive and being protected. And it was there, walking back and forth in that empty building, that I finally accepted a truth I had avoided for years. The mistake I made at 55 seemed small, reasonable, almost invisible. But it didn't just steal money. It stole the right to rest. If you asked me today what my biggest financial mistake was, you might expect me to say, trusting the wrong advisor. But that's not the complete answer. The scam was the push. The real mistake came before and continued afterward. I never truly understood how money works with time. I thought saving money was enough, that investing was for people who earned a lot, that retirement was too far away to deserve attention now. I was wrong. If I had understood compound interest at 30, at 40, my life today would be completely different. Not because of large sums, but because of consistency. A few dollars a month, for many years. That feels small when you're young, but it's enormous when you're old. When I lost part of the money at 55, I still had time, but I panicked, and panic is the enemy of good decisions. Instead of reorganizing, learning, seeking real help, I froze. I stopped investing, stopped contributing, stopped believing. That was the second mistake, and perhaps the most expensive one. Because even after a loss, time could still have worked in my favor. But I let time pass without doing anything. I treated money like a minefield, when in reality it needed strategy. Another common and extremely American mistake was trusting the system too much. I believed the company would take care of me, that Social Security would be enough, that things work themselves out. They don't work themselves out. Social Security helps, but it doesn't sustain a whole life. It barely covers the basics. And when you don't have reserves, any fluctuation becomes a threat. The cruelest part is that no one teaches us this when it matters. Not in school, not at work, not in the family. You learn when you're already paying the price. Today, walking through the night as a security guard, I see buildings full of young people, lights on, careers just beginning. And I think about how many of them are repeating the exact same patterns I repeated. Spending raises, postponing decisions, trusting too much. I didn't lose everything because of a scam. I lost because I didn't have structure before it. And that's what I wish someone had told me. It's not the mistake that destroys you. It's the lack of preparation for when it happens. If I had had a simple plan, if I had diversified, if I had understood that security is not a promise, it's a process, I might not be here, counting the minutes of a night shift at 75 years old. And this is the part that hurts the most, not because it's too late, but because it could have been different. It took me a long time to accept that I couldn't fix everything anymore. I spent years arguing with myself, imagining alternate versions of my life. If I had done this, if I had started earlier. That kind of thinking only steals the little piece you have left. One day, in the middle of a shift, walking through the empty parking lot, I stopped, literally stopped, and thought, okay, this is what I have. What can I still do with it? That question changed everything. I couldn't go back to my 40s. I couldn't recover the money I lost. But I could still stop making things worse. The first step was facing reality without drama. I listed all my expenses, cut what I could, accepted a simpler standard of living without pretending it was temporary, because it wasn't. Then I went back to learning. From scratch. I learned that even with little money, there is still strategy, that investing late is not useless. It's different, that preserving capital matters more than growing fast. That risk carries a different weight when you're already old. I started setting aside small amounts. Nothing heroic, nothing impressive, but consistent. Because consistency still works. It just doesn't perform miracles. I also learned the importance of not trusting blindly. Today, I ask questions, lots of them. If someone promises absolute safety, I walk away. If someone guarantees returns, I hang up. Real security is boring. It's slow. It's transparent. Another hard lesson was emotional. Asking for help is not weakness. I talk to my children. I told the truth, not to ask for money, but to break the silence. That lifted an enormous weight off my chest. The financial mistake was mine, but the isolation was killing me. Working as a security guard is still necessary. I don't romanticize it, but today I work with awareness. I know why. I know until when. And that changes everything. I also stopped defining myself by the mistake. Because if you let a mistake become your identity, it wins twice. What I do now is simple. Protect what remains. Avoid new traps. Share what I've learned. Maybe I'll never have the retirement I imagined, but I can have something almost as important. Dignity. And if you're hearing this at 45, 50, 55 years old, don't wait for a shock to learn, because lost money hurts. But wasted time hurts more. If there's one thing I learned too late, it's that ill-intentioned people don't look dangerous. They don't shout. They don't pressure you. They don't show up looking like villains. They arrive calmly, with pretty words, with promises that sound responsible. If someone asked me today how to protect themselves, I would say this: distrust anyone who says something is 100% safe. Absolute security doesn't exist. Well-explained risk does. Never hand your money to someone who can't explain simply how it will be used. If you don't understand, don't invest. There is no shame in asking questions. The shame is losing everything in silence. Never trust just because someone seems polite, experienced, or recommended by someone. A recommendation is not protection. Knowledge is. And above all, don't be afraid to say no. Saying no may feel uncomfortable for a few seconds. Saying yes to the wrong thing can cost you the rest of your life. But here is the part I really want you to take with you. It is never too late to learn. I learned after 70, slowly, with mistakes, with humility. I learned that financial education is not about getting rich. It's about sleeping in peace. It's about not depending on luck. It's about doing the best possible with what you have today. Even with little money, you can have control. Even at an advanced age, you can have clarity. Even after making mistakes, you can rebuild dignity. Today, I still work. I still do night shifts, but I no longer work in fear. I know where I stand. I know what I can do. And I know what I will never accept again. If this story touched you, it's not by accident. These stories exist for a reason, so you don't have to learn everything the most painful way. Stay until the end of each one. Protect your future. Protect those you love. Because aging is inevitable. But aging unprotected, that can still be avoided. If this story made you uncomfortable, that's not a bad thing. It means there's still time. These stories exist for a reason, to help you protect your future before it's too late. If you don't want to learn these lessons the most painful way, stay with us. And if this story made you think of someone you love, or of a fear you carry in silence, leave a comment below. Not for the algorithm, for awareness. Because the most dangerous financial mistakes are the ones no one has the courage to talk about.